Hi there, flow. Flow is something that you hear bandied around, like people use this word, and you hear it on all the grand designs and your house made perfect, and people are concerned with not having flow in their home. And when I first heard it, I was a bit, as an architect, I was thinking, I really should know what this means. And people would be talking about flow, and it just seemed like a very strange thing because it's not something we actually discussed at university studying architecture. Flow, it's kind of like, well, what is it? But basically, what it is it's a kind of a visual and a physical thing. So that's what we talked about in architecture school, was how to create flow visually in terms of creating a sense of spaciousness, of enjoying views, of enjoying light, and physically in terms of actually being able to move through the space comfortably. And that is really what flow is. And I thought I would come on and talk with you about flow because it's something that I see so many of my clients struggle with in their homes. And they struggle with it because doors are in the wrong position, furniture layouts are not working, and they either find that they want to be in the space and people are walking across the space and that makes it uncomfortable, or they find that when they want to get from one place to another, it feels uncomfortable because it feels like a torturous, challenging journey to get from one place to another. So how do we solve that? That's what is an interesting question. And so first of all, I would love to know if you are experiencing any struggles with flow in your home, whether that's the visual kind of flow or the physical kind of flow. And let me know if you are. I'm just looking up here at the screen because I can't see what's going on. There we go, I'm live. So now I hopefully can see comments. So please do comment and let me know what your experience is of flow in your home. Is it working for you, or are there some issues you'd like to overcome and improve? I'm going to be helping you today with some of my ideas about flow and how you can improve flow in your home. So I have this theory that there are two types of space. I haven't got words for these. I don't know if other people have a similar theory. This is something that I've come to the realization of, and I haven't seen anyone talking about this. If you have some ideas of words that make sense to you that describe what I'm about to explain, then let me know. I'd love to have this conversation with you. But my theory is that there are two types of space. There's a kind of an active space. That's the space that you're moving through. And then there's a kind of a static space. That type of space is where you are more on the spot. You're not necessarily completely still, but you're there, you're being, in a way, you're doing something in that space, rather than moving through it or across it. So that active space is kind of like where it's movement, you're going across the space, through the space, and that static kind of space is where you're being and doing and you are in one sort of spot. Those two types of spaces require different types of arrangement of spaces. And one thing that is really important is position of doors into that space. And I've got my tablet up, and I'm going to be looking up here because I'm going to be checking, but what I'm going to start to do is draw you some examples on the screen of what that looks like. So if you, for example, have a room, let me just get this right. So say you've got a room and this is your room. I'm going to draw you my living room. My living room is rubbish. It has terrible flow, and it's something that I've been working on. So I've got a fireplace. I've got a set of double doors that open up to another living room. I've got a door here, a radiator, and then I've got a set of patio doors which slide. So this room is quite a typical sort of problem that I find is you can see in many homes. So first of all, we've got this clash of doors. This door is very close. There's no real comfortable place to be because we've got these kind of cross movements across the space. And so there's this little bit over here and this little bit over here and maybe there where you sort of feel like it's kind of a static space where you can be still, and the rest of it is all this movement type of space going on, and that makes this room feel very uncomfortable. So what I do is I've kind of addressed it in a temporary way in my own space, and this is not ideally I'd like to do more to it. When I moved in, it used to have double doors in the middle here on this side with windows, and when I changed it over to patio doors, this half is more static, and because this bit moves, it moved it away from the edge, so I gained more space than I had before with just the patio doors. So the double doors in the center. So that in a way created a bit more static space. And what you really need in a room for a room to really function well is for there to be a good balance between this active space where you're moving across and this static space where you can be stiller and be and do. So that's why my living room as it is doesn't really work. So what I do is I keep these doors shut almost the whole of the time, and so we just have this door and this, and that means that is the main access. It still cuts across, but it means that we've got these kind of more static spaces, and that starts to allow me then to create more of a doing space. And because we don't often actually go through that door, it's more of a summertime thing. So in the winter, this becomes there's no crossing going across the room, it's just a space to be. So you come in and it's a space to be, and that works really much better. I'm just seeing if there's any comments. Say hi and let me know what your experiences are of flow in your home. So different things that you can do. So if you've got a room, say you've got I'm going to give you an example of an extension that I designed. So this was the back of the house. There was a car. Why has it just done that? So there was a corridor that came in, a door here, and this was the front door. There was a set of stairs that went up here, and another room at the front. This was the front room, the back room, and then a tiny kitchen. So in this house, they had quite a straightforward route, very compact movement, and so that worked really well. And then a set of doors that went out, which kind of cut into it. But this was a dining room, and this was a sitting room, and it worked quite well. But the kitchen was tiny, teeny tiny, and they wanted to have a better kitchen, better connection. They wanted more more of an open plan type feel as well, because there was a door here, and it just didn't really work for them because it was so tiny, that kitchen. So what we did was, I'm just going to draw the back of the house. So you've got the door in to that back room, and what we explored were different ways to rearrange this room. So what we wanted to do was extend at the back here, and they wanted sort of utility space, downstairs loo, bigger kitchen, more connection through, and better connection with the garden as well through the kitchen. So what we initially looked at was putting the kitchen over here, making a back door and a door into the kitchen, and having a loo and a utility space here, and having a kitchen a bit like that, with this being open. And what that did was, it meant you had this kind of very circuitous route through, not that comfortable, and it cut this room into, and so you've got all this movement going on, and a split room in terms of usability and comfort. So that didn't really work that well. So instead, what we did was we kept the kitchen to the side that it was at originally, which was this side, and we put the kitchen in here, and then we put the loo and utility in here. Now that did mean that this room then became darker, but because it was an end terrace fireplace here, we were able to put windows in here and make this very light, so that wasn't so much of an issue. And then we had this open here, and being able to have the door in. So this then meant that the vast majority of this room was a space to be still, and the route through and out the side, to take the bins and stuff, the side gate was here outside. That route was much less impeded, much less of a struggle to get through, and that's what you're trying to do. So what we did to sort of explore that, and this is what you can do, is to take any room. If you've got a room, and say you've got a door and another door, if you put a dot at the point of your door and draw a line between those two dots, obviously that's a rubbish line, but anyway, that's what gives you, hi Julie, how are you? That's what gives you the flow, is not having to move around anything, having that easy uninterrupted line of movement between the two helps you to really make sure that you can move freely across that space. But if it's a space that you want to be in, you need to consider what your furniture placement is and how you want to use that space, and if that movement is chopping up the space and making it less of a comfortable place to be, then that maybe is not the right location for that door. And that's why having it over here, where you can have your movement pattern there and it doesn't interfere with the rest of the space, and this becomes a space to be and this becomes a space to move, gives you a much more comfortable flow, a much better balance between that kind of static doing space and that active moving through kind of space. So I think it's a really simple thing to do if you get your floor plan and literally draw dots, and you can on the doors and then draw lines between them, and that will help you see if there's a good flow or not. I'm trying to think, there was another project that I worked on where my clients had a kind of a house like this and a front door, and then they had a living room like that. Actually, not like that. a living room like that. Why can't I delete? Living room like that with this sort of staircase coming up here like that, and then a kitchen and dining room at the back. And so they had a sofa here. This is kind of like when they bought the house, this is where the people that they bought the house from had put their furniture, and a fireplace and a television. So, you know, this is a very typical kind of problem that I see, is that when you buy your house, you might have like the aerial point for your TV is in one place and the sockets, and it's all in one place, and that's where the people who you bought your house from, that's where they put their sofa, and that's where they put their TV. So when you come in, you put your sofa and your TV in the same place. And this is like your house, Remy? Ah, that's interesting. So this is the problem that they were experiencing was that anyone coming in was like always crossing in front. And so if you were sitting here enjoying your program, other people were always going across. So your space to be was like in conflict with the movement, and so there was no really good flow in this house, and it didn't work for them in many different ways. And so what we had to do was create a way for this space not to be in conflict. And so actually, I mean, they were looking at quite a lot of work, but what we looked at was quite simply to change the staircase a bit and make the staircase come up here, and actually create more of I can't actually remember exactly how we did it now, but it was something more like that. So that they had, first of all, one of the routes was, or even maybe we even actually did it like this. So we put a wall in here and it actually created a corridor. Now, creating corridors can be a solution, but it does take all of this space then comes off your room. But it meant that they could actually then, you know, have a nice big comfy corner sofa. They could keep the TV there if they wanted to. They could sit and together watch the TV, and any sort of movement backwards and forwards, up and down the stairs to the kitchen at the back, which they kind of wanted to make open plan, that could all happen. And this could be still that kind of still doing kind of space, more relaxing without all of that. So it was smaller space, but it actually worked better for them. This isn't actually a solution that we did. I can't remember now. It's a while ago, but we did some other things. I think we added an extension to the side and looked at all sorts of other stuff going on as well. But this is one way you can get around it, is to actually add corridor space in, if that doesn't make this the sort of the doing space too small. Now, interestingly, a lot of architects are interested in open plan space and not having circulation space. And when you do that, that can work as well. But I'm trying to think of like an example of when I've done this, because I'm just actually trying to think of something. No, there's so many projects like going back in time. I'm trying to remember one that would illustrate this. I had a really complicated house where they had like a garage, a hallway, and then like a kind of, yeah, there was a hall here. This was a really weird one actually. Then they had a toilet, downstairs toilet. Then they had the staircase that went up like that. So went up with a cupboard underneath. And then they had a kitchen and a utility room. So it was like kitchen there, and there was another door in the kitchen, and then there was a door to another. It was a weird, kind of a weird house. So this was like the dining room, but then there was no door on here. So you came in, this is the front door, and then there was a door to the garage there. So there's obviously movement here, movement there, movement here, so much movement going on. And just this like bit over here where it was a bit comfortable, but also all these kind of movement paths where like really there was just so much movement going on. It was like just a lot of movement and really, really chaotic and not very calm kind of space. And so we looked at the solution to this was a much more open plan space. So what we did was kept the garage where it was, and because they wanted to use that as a gym, and we kept the front door where it was as well. And then instead of having this space having, you know, all those doors off it, we just removed all the doors, and we actually turned this space into a hall with a door from here into, we extended behind the garage and made that one big space like this. And then we put the stairs went, we kept the upper part of the stairs, and we turned it round so that you could go up this way, and then we put underneath this taller part of the stairs, we put a toilet underneath there. And then this was like cloakroom space. And so instead of having a room with lots and lots of openings, obviously there were some structural changes in here. But then the original kitchen, we put then an island here. They kept the door into the utility. We blocked up that door at the back, and it was a bit weird. It sort of did something like that actually. And so then we had the windows. I think we might have turned one of the doors into a windows, and then we had like in this airlock between the kitchen going through the utility to outside. And then we had this put a fireplace in here, and had this nice big corner sofa, nice window seat here, nice beautiful big kind of dining space. And we made this kind of, you know, like a openable wall. So then the routes through are here. Yes, you go through over here, but it's just so much more open and much more open space. And in terms of visual flow, it had much more visual flow. And in terms of all this sort of movement up and movement to the loo, that was then all to this one door. Obviously, if you go by that kind of triangular bit, you just kind of have to prioritize like which are your primary routes, which are the most important routes. And this door was to their kind of, they had another fireplace here and a sort of a more snug kind of living room. And what they wanted to do was have this space as more of an entertaining space. And then this became, you know, cloaks, going upstairs, toilet, all that kind of like, and a bigger space as well to greet and say goodbye to people. So having this kind of primary route for guests coming in was really just to come in, and then maybe on a nice day, because there was amazing views out here, having this open and they, you know, had a big terrace here, and they were thinking of like being able to sit, have drinks, have meal, lay out buffet or whatever. And then, you know, you wouldn't have so much like your guests kind of like necessarily going around in the kitchen bit, but your guests could kind of mill around, but they wouldn't necessarily need to be going through. It's not so much of a through route, it becomes much more of a being, doing space, a more static space, rather than this active moving through it kind of space, like it was before, with all this movement pattern and not a lot of actual chill play space to be, do, still. Yeah, that extension made a huge difference. Oh, that's the active one. So yeah, we extended here, and that made extended there and changed this, reorientated this staircase and changed it all around, and that made a huge difference. So these simple things like the position of the door, the movement across the space, the position of you know, the key elements in the room, and where your primary movement is, those are key to create that sense of flow in terms of movement. And then other things that you can do to kind of maintain that that kind of sense of flow. That just looks like a massive big scribble now, doesn't it? Oh, that's because I've actually got loads of layers open at the same time. That kind of thing where you to maintain that. So then what you need to do is look at the stuff that you have in your space, the furniture that you have in your space. I'm looking back here at my room. So my living room is rubbish for flow, but the way that I manage it is by positioning the furniture, closing off the doors, and depending on the time of year as well, I actually rearrange the furniture in the room to suit the time of year. So in the summer, I'll have the furniture in one position, and in the winter, I'll have it in another position, because that suits the way that we use the space and the way that we live at that period of time. Because in the summer, we're going outside a lot more, and so we need the orientation of the room to be slightly different to how we have it in the winter. So considering where you place the furniture, and also having stuff, like general stuff, like having clear routes through, really helps you maintain that sense of flow in terms of physical sense of flow, but also in terms of a visual sense of flow. That's where you start to look at finishes and colors that can bring in that visual flow, and also views across, like what you can see, how much you can see, how far you can see. That is what creates more of a visual flow. So let's see. What's funny here is the result looks so much better from a feng shui perspective, which is a lot to do with common sense most of the time. And the garage seems to be more part of the home than in the initial situation. Hi, Shaban. Hi, Donna. Yes, I see what you mean. Yeah. To be honest with you, I don't know a lot about feng shui. That's not something I've specialized in. I've looked at it, but it's not a huge specialism of mine. But I've kind of come to it from this view of these two types of spaces: an active, moving sort of space, and a not passive, but like a static, more or less static kind of being and doing space, and being and getting the balance between those two types of spaces right, so that the room can actually function. You can be in that space, you can do what you want to do in that space without it feeling too active, and it disrupts you, and you can't settle, you can't relax, but then being able to be active and move across the room freely. That's the flow, is that sense of flow of movement, of being able to pass through or get from one place to another where you want to go within that room, without it disrupting that sense, that the stillness. I'm still like, this is my kind of theory that I have in my head, but I have not really spoken about it apart from to one or two clients, and I don't have language around it. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. So I hope that this was useful to you in terms of what flow is, why it's important, that theory of like the two different space types, how you can create it and check that you have it or improve it, and then how you can maintain it. I hope that's been helpful. Let me know what your biggest takeaway has been from this. I'd love to know. Let me know in the comments. And yeah, that's it for now. Bye. I say bye, but I actually don't know how to go about it. There we go.